Saturday's History of Van Alstyne Baseball was moved inside to First Christian Church, and even though it didn't rain, it worked out. There was plenty of room for games, hot dogs with mustard, popcorn, and even free ice cream thanks to Airview AC.
We had an opportunity to tour the museum here in town, and I'm sure maybe like many, we didn't even know that this amazing historical place existed in Van Alstyne, Texas. And so, we were just amazed by the museum and by Lisa's help, and so we wanted to return the favor 100%. So that's why we're here today.
After his K-10 interview, historian Dave Henderson gave a fascinating presentation on the history of Van Alstyne baseball. It all started in 1901. From the Grays to the Reds to the Oil Burners and the Bean Burners, even the women's teams that had some great stars.
Wilma Smith and Hazel Shaw, who had been stars on the 1923 Van Alstyne High School girls team, in 1928 played on the Van Alstyne ladies team. And after the season was over, they were signed by the Dallas Sunco Oilers, a ladies team out of Dallas, and they played in the playoffs with them. Of course, Wilma Smith had a game-winning RBI to help them in that effort.
Those are the two ladies who made it to the pros, and there have been 5 men over the years.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation because just recently, Major League Baseball just recently has recognized the Negro League records. And so Hubert Wilson, who pitched for the Kansas City Monarchs in 1928 and 1929, is now recognized as a Major League Baseball player from Van Alstyne, which gives us our 5 from Van Alstyne.
That's crazy. And then we had 2 Grays that played together here that ended up playing together in the pros.
Yeah, there were 2 pairs. In 1928 for the St. Louis Browns, Sam Gray, pitcher, and Guy Sturdy, first baseman, both raised here in Van Alstyne. They were teammates for the 1919 Van Alstyne Grays. They were teammates in the 1928 St. Louis Browns, who are now the Baltimore Orioles. Then in the 30s, John Whitehead and Monty Stratton, who both had played for the Van Alstyne Grays, were teammates for the 1935 to 1938 Chicago White Sox, both pitchers.
Even high school baseball in Van Alstyne has some really high points, sometimes at the expense of the men's city team.
You talked about the high school team beating the city teams.
Yes. Yes. 2 out of 3, and I love the news guy described that as the Van Alstyne boys beat the once mighty Van Alstyne City team. So be interesting the conversations after that game. That's for sure.
Yeah. You're around the dining room table, probably. Dad, we beat you.
Exactly, sons beating their fathers. Absolutely.
One name that came up a lot was Win Blassingame, who was there from the very beginning.
In fact, Win Blassingame is one of the few people that's recorded that played for the 1901 Van Alstyne Reds and for the Grays. I don't know how many years he played for the Grays, but he was an outfielder for the 1901 Van Alstyne Reds. He was an outfielder for X amount of years for the Grays, and then he became the manager of the Grays in 1929 until 1934, and then he came back and rescued them in 41 when they had a manager resign, and Blassingame actually managed again in 1941. So he was also like the president of the team during those years. So he has a 40-year connection to the Van Alstyne Reds/Grays from 1901 to 1941.
And I'm right, he was mayor for 3 terms, you said?
3-term mayor.
Okay.
2-time manager, 3-term mayor.
Right.
There were pictures of the old timers to peruse, and a member of the current Little League Grays showed up to remind us the history of Van Alstyne baseball is still being made. Reporting for the City of Van Alstyne, I'm Mike Shaw.